Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We do hope you're keeping very, very safe and well. Thank you so much for joining us for our final preview of the season. I can hear the applause in the background. I can hear the relief in the background. Yes, we have finally made it. Yes, we are finally there. Spurs' final Premier League preview of the season, of course, away to Leeds United at Elland Road. But so much to discuss during this show. Tottenham Hotspur reportedly closing in on their new manager, Arne Slot. I think we're on number 55, are we, since Rick started this? Possibly, since Rick's became the last one on Spurs. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're listening to the show for the first time, you can find us on iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on Twitter at Last Word on Spurs. We're on Facebook and Instagram too. And join us as ever. We've got 3 great guests at Last Word on Spurs. Some fairly regular faces that you've seen on here, definitely during your time. But finally, back on Last Word on Spurs. As always, he's been with us for a lot of the season, through pain, through joy. The wonderful Ricky Norwood's back. Actor Ricky Norwood. Ricks, final time, buddy, for a preview. How are you?
Oh, bro. I mean, oh my gosh. Thank goodness it's the end of the season, eh? We have been clawing towards the end. It's felt like we've been drowning, and every week we just about get our head above water and just gasp enough breath to go again. And like, finally, we're here. Finally, we're at the end. Finally, we can put the season to bed. Finally, we can start again, and hopefully there is change on the horizon. I've got to believe it. I've got to say it. I've got to put it out there and just hope and pray that it happens for next season. But yes, happy to be back on. Always an honor and a pleasure, Ricks. And let's have it for the final time, final preview show of this crazy season.
Absolutely likewise. And Ricks, just a quick one. You're the sound from your mic, you are sounding a cross between the new manager Arne Slot and Rod Stewart. So I don't know if you want to have a quick test of the earphones, or you might want to lose them completely. Whatever's easier for you, bud. I'll let you work out whatever's best for you. That's absolutely fine. The wonderful Ricky Norwood back on Last Word on Spurs. Joining Ricks, delighted to have him back on. I think he was on at the very, very start of the season, then midway, and it's not his fault that since he's come back twice, things have declined massively. Definitely not his fault. We've got the wonderful, of course, TalkSport's very own broadcaster, journalist, Paul Hawksbee's back on Last Word on Spurs. Paul, lovely to have you here. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks, Ricky. Yeah, pretty good. Well, I say that the season's been an absolute bin fire, but beyond that, I'm pretty good. Yeah.
Lovely to have you back on. And making up our panel tonight, I'm not sure we're getting a compilation on this season, given what we've all been put through. We've got the wonderful Dan Morgan, of course, back on via Yidvids. Dan, loves you back on Last One on Spurs. Let's get the $1 million question out of the way now, Dan. Are we going to get a compilation on this utter mess?
I can give you an absolute concrete answer of absolutely not. Unless someone pays me £15,000, I am not going to sit there and trawl through that terrible season just to make a video. So no,
I tell you.
But it's great to be back anyway. It's great to be back and see you all. So
likewise, mate. Likewise. Lovely to have you guys here. Well, just a bit of housekeeping before we do get right into all things Tottenham. Of course, we're delighted to be sponsored by the Beavertown Corner Pin. That, of course, is the Beavertown bang opposite our South Stand. Now, of course, you can grab a pint before or after the games at the Beavertown Corner Pin. And as always, it's getting really, really rampant there as we build up towards the summer now. So please make sure you check out all things Beavertown related by going to, of course, beavertownbrewery.co.uk. Right, housekeeping out the way. And naturally, that means we lose Ricky Norwood, bless him. We'll get Rick's back in a second. So, Paul, I'm going to steer the opening to you on this show. I think Ricky knew what was coming. I was going to ask Rick's about the fallout from Brentford. So I don't blame him for doing a runner, because I wish I did the runner as well before that. So, Paul, let's come over to you. We've criticised Spurs for being so often slow starters at home, but the most opposite we saw, Spurs actually flew out the traps against Brentford, started really well. It was a brilliant first half, which even led to actually an applause at half-time, and the players not being booed off, which was, again, quite a surprise given the nature of our season. But, of course, Spurs' failure to get the second goal did prove ultimately costly. The intensity dropped after that first half break, allowed Brentford to get back into the context. And quite frankly, in the most politest way I can say this, I thought Ryan Mason was outcoached in that second half by Thomas Frank. What did you make of that Brentford result overall, Paul?
Yeah, you're right. It was a really enjoyable first half. I don't think I've enjoyed a first half like that for ages. They were moving the ball well. The shape of the team was good. It was a good watch. It was entertaining. We're not used to being entertained at Tottenham much these days, so I kind of enjoyed it. And it was a great goal, and you thought we'll build on that. Then there was a couple of other chances. Emerson had that one cleared off the line, which was unlucky. One or two others where the final ball wasn't good enough. So apart from missing clear-cut chances, I think once or twice we let ourselves down with a final ball. And then, as you say, applauded off at the end of the first half. And then they come out of the second half and it's just really flat again. I mean, there was a little bit more intensity from Brentford. I think they had decided that there was a massive gap between Longley and Davies that they could exploit. And that's exactly what they did. They did that twice, and then we gifted them the third goal. And as soon as the second goal went in for them, it all turned pretty toxic again, which was a shame. I mean, it was certainly a shame for the women's team that probably got half the attendance they would have got 2 hours later. I've got to be honest. I mean, I didn't stay for the lap of appreciation. Vista's goal had barely touched the net by the time my plastic chair was clanging back. I was on my way. It was a really frustrating game. I'd rather us be garbage for 90 minutes than good for 45, and then fall apart in the second half. That was a really frustrating game, but just summed up the season. It was a microcosm of the season, albeit, as you said, Ricky, in reverse, because it's normally the other way around in our games: bad starts and better finishes. But yeah, I can't wait for this season to end. I was so pleased. I don't normally feel like this. I was so pleased it was the last game of the season. I don't want to watch that team as things are in this environment, in this culture. I don't want to watch that team anymore this season, please. I've had enough.
I mean, it's any consolation. I think they probably feel the same, Paul. It looks like they can't wait to get off the field now and can't bear even playing on it. So God knows what we should expect ahead of Leeds to come on Sunday. Rick's coming over to you. I know you tried to do a runner on me there when I tried to bring up Brentford. I would say definitely not your fault, but I think you tactically planned that for sure. It's been a difficult season, and bless you, you've been here through a lot of what's been some difficult games to have to review and even preview to some degree. But the most bizarre thing, Ricks, is the actual quality of football in that first half against Brentford was really, really good. We actually saw a return to the 4-2-3-1 formation. Dier Kulusevski looked like he found, his role in that number 10. Basuma, again, looked very, very good in that first half. Kane, of course, that we can't forget. One incredible goal that was from Harry Kane. I think that's the real shame, that the goal itself will be really clouded because of the nature of how Spurs performed in that second half. So give me your thoughts, if you can, Ricks, on the back of that performance and what your takeaways were from it.
I mean, for me, Ricks, it was the first time for a long time that I was actually excited. I started that game and I didn't expect much. I was hoping for a good showing. I was hoping for them to build on what Ryan Mason's been doing in training and stuff like that, and from what he's been saying in the press conferences. And suddenly they came out and it was the old Tottenham. It was Tottenham playing the Tottenham way. And I got excited. I sat forward on my seat for the first time in a long time watching the game. I really enjoyed the kind of formation switch. I liked that he kind of changed up the side a bit, brought Danjuma in. I was like, okay, cool. Let's see what the boy's about. And in the game itself, that first half, we create, like Paul was saying just there, like we created chances, the touches, the passes were to feet. They were pretty accurate for most of them. The flicks from Kulusevski at number 10, he looked great at number 10. I started to remember about, during the World Cup, about that little mini preseason that we had, and he was playing at number 10 and he was scoring goals and he was dynamic and he was using his pace and his trickery and that wonderful left foot of his. And suddenly we started to see that in the game versus Brighton in that first half. So I was super excited. I loved that first half. I thought, all right, here we go. Here's the boys in the final game of this crappy season. With two interim managers and a so-called elite manager in Conte as well. And for all the ups and downs and the upheavals, they was about to give us something back. They was about to show us that there was pride in the shirt and there was pride in getting up and kind of let's go. And they showed some fight. They showed vigor. They showed some kind of improvisation as well in the final third of the play. So I was super excited. But what a punch in the gut, and what a goal by Kane again. You know what? Like, Kane scored so many wonderful goals and he's been our talisman for so long that sometimes we've said so much about him that we end up forgetting to mention him during the kind of reports on the games that we've just seen. But what a goal by him. I don't think it was quite a direct free kick. So I don't know whether that hoodoo continues or not. But what a strike. And so I'm buoyed up. I'm ready to go in the second half. So to see the collapse and to see the regression in that side in the second half was such a punch in the gut, and it totally kind of destroyed and poo-pooed everything good that they done in the first half. And part of me, I know, like you were saying about, Mason kind of got tactically undone by Frank in the second half and stuff. But part of me is kind of like, that's a trait within those players that are on the field almost. Do you know what I mean? Because we've seen it so many times. So I can't really say that it's Mason's fault. How many managers have we heard say that we didn't want them to kind of drop back and invite pressure and invite pressure? We've heard Mourinho say it, we've heard Conte say it. I don't know what Nuno said because I try and forget that moment in time. And we've heard the players say it themselves. They don't know why they do it. So it's a bit of a trait in which they done. And yes, with Mason being a very young coach, a novice coach almost, even though he's been coaching for the last 5-6 years, that's what's going to happen with a manager that's learning on the job. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to say the wrong things or do the wrong things, and it's up to them to kind of recognize that mistake, like in life, and then look to address it and try and not make that mistake again. So it was like it was the story of our season in that game. And how many times have we said that about many a games this season, that it's just been a reflection of all of the results that have happened this year, whether we've been a first half team, whether we've been a second half team, whether we've not shown up at all, whether we've regressed, whether we've shot ourselves in the foot, kicked ourselves in the backside, given the opposition goals left, right and center. And that's what happened in that second half, so it was a proper punch in the gut. But for me, I had to, because I'm tired of being angry, I'm tired of being upset, I'm tired of being frustrated with my club and with my side. I love my side and I want to love them. So I tried to concentrate on that first 45 to kind of go, there are good players there. There are players that can kind of play attacking football, and we can look very different with a forward, front-footed type of coach and some additions that have not been stained with that same kind of trait of dropping back, or that mentality of we need to hold on, or this is what we need to do, and make the mistakes in our own kind of defensive areas to give away goals. So I've got to hold on to that hope. I've got to hold on to the little green shoots that I saw in that 45, and absolutely pray to God and the universe and everything out there that the change is coming, because it can't be this bad next year. It just can't be.
No, you'd like to think not. Dan, bringing you in, you've already given us the breaking news from your side that there definitely will not be a compilation on this season, which I know has devastated many now. They can't sleep at night now. There will not be a compilation to come on this season. God, what shall we do with ourselves? But look, the matter is, Dan, coming over to you, of course, that it didn't matter in the end. Spurs, 22 shots at goal, 8 on target, 62% of the possession. But, Brentford really were ruthless, netting 3 of their 4 shots on target. Both of Brian Mbeumo's low strikes were sent into the right corner of the net. Dan, give me your feelings on the back of that result. I know you guys didn't record at the weekend. I know it was on deliberate case, or whether you just you're saving yourselves for a big end of the season. Give me your thoughts, Dan, on what you witnessed at the weekend.
Yeah, not good. To be honest, it's hard to add much more than what's been said already. Well, one thing I would say is I think the one thing I disagree with a little bit is in a sense of, I don't think it was the halftime break that ruined us. I think just the confidence, as soon as they let a goal in, as soon as it went 1-1 the other day, you just knew what was coming, because their confidence is completely on the floor. Whether that's Conte's fault, whether that's Mason's fault for not picking them up, it's a similar theme that they just don't feel like they can hold out pretty much in certain sexes. And I think the worst problem and the saddest bit about the whole thing is that, Harry Kane's goal was absolutely fabulous. I mean, it was one of the best goals he's probably ever scored for Tottenham. And I think I'd still give it as a free kick, but I know others disagree with me. He 28 goals this season now from 36 games,
Remarkable.
which is
it's
incredible. And the saddest thing is that I don't blame anyone who was there for not hanging around for the lap of honor. But if there was one guy who deserved it, it was him. It must just be such a kick in the gut of him, just constantly, just doing all these wonderful things for Tottenham, and just the rest of them sort of letting him down. But yeah, it wasn't good, to be honest. And until Paul just said when he left 88 minutes or whenever the third goal went in, I thought, oh yeah, we lost 3-1. I've just sort of blanked out of my mind, because they all sort of run into like one just terrible last 10 games that I want to just forget about after Sunday ASAP.
Yeah, Dan, to stick with you, European permutations. I know some even dread me saying the word Europe for next season. Some just want to completely avoid it. But of course, Tottenham's hopes of finishing in Europe were handed a massive, massive blow, of course, by that weekend result. We're currently in 8th, 1 point behind Aston Villa, heading into the final game of the season. Now, depending on Brighton's result against Southampton, which is happening, I believe, at the moment. Brighton result against Southampton? That's already happened, isn't it? I'm going crazy. It's already happened. So obviously, my apologies. The fact, obviously, Brighton, of course, beat Southampton. Spurs are in a situation now where, in terms of the final day, Spurs have to beat Leeds United and hope Villa lose at home on the final day against Brighton, which seems very, very unlikely in my mind. But what's your feelings, Dan, in relation to European football of some form? Would you want the Conference League if it's on offer?
I mean, I know the times have changed, but there's a very famous quote about Tottenham about being in Europe. So absolutely. I sort of stick by that. I know the competition is a bit of a joke. I don't think it's something that we really should be striving for, but I think it's better than nothing. That's just my personal view. I think, especially with the sort of level of competition that is in that competition, it's the teams aren't that high in the group stage. I know last time when we were in it, I think we had a really, for the circumstances, a really tough group with Vitesse and Rennes and a few others. So I think we should be in it. I think if we can be in it, we should be. I think it would be a good idea to blood those youngsters that haven't had the opportunities in the last couple of seasons at all. I mean, there's a couple of good young Spurs players who have been in around that squad for the last 2 or 3 years that just have had no opportunity because, we've had so many big games and you don't want to throw them in, etc. I think there was the kid we bought from Wigan, I can't remember his name, and Scarlett should be back next year. I know he's been in Portsmouth. Divine, that's right. I think it's more of a positive than a negative. I do understand people's feelings against it, but I think if you offer it to me now, you said we could finish 7th, I think I'd take it.
Paul, without causing a massive deviation to the show, probably I'm going to ask you a similar question. Now, obviously, Spurs' position now is, of course, that they have to go out and beat Leeds United and hope results elsewhere do the business for, of course, them to secure some form of European football. I mean, I've been arguing, Paul, for the last few weeks on Last Word on Spurs that for a club that have, one trophy in the last 20 years, I understand the Europa Conference League, the name conference, maybe doesn't sit well with many, and I understand the fact of the Thursday travelling, but ultimately, should we really be turning our nose up at it, Paul? The fact of qualifying for some form of European football offer?
Yeah, I sort of picking up on what Dan said there. We seem to have a real problem picking ourselves up to play well in anything but the Champions League. You think when we've been in the Europa League or we were in the Conference League, our performances generally, especially away from home, were pretty poor. And it's almost as if the players feel that it's kind of beneath them. I suppose they did get to a final. And maybe those players feel they're Champions League players, but we seem in every other, especially away from home. I can't remember the last time we had a very good away performance. I mean, okay, in the Champions League I can, but in other competitions, we've always struggled for some reason.
Yep.
I mean, it will be an issue for the new manager because it will be Thursday, Sunday, which he can do without. And who knows? I mean, there is 2 arguments. This one to say, yeah, we should be in European competition and a trophy is a trophy. The other one is it gives the new manager a week to work with a team, no distractions apart from domestic cup competitions. So it's a difficult one. It doesn't sort of stir the blood, and the prize at the end of it is to get into the Europa League. But when you look at what next season is going to be like in the Premier League and how many teams are going to be vying for top 6, I don't think you look a gift horse in the mouth. That's going to get only more competitive from next season. Liverpool won't be as bad again. Chelsea won't be as bad again. So we're in an 8 or 9 team situation to try and get one of 6, 7 places. So, unless we're careful, we could start to slip away, and we may kind of think we may look back to the heady days of the Conference League.
Do you think, before I come on to Rick's, Paul, to stick with you, do you think it's also dependent on the calibre of the manager? Because someone like Arne Slot will come on to you. Of course, it looks like, it's heavily been linked with the role now. It looks like the Spurs are in the process of trying to agree some form of compensation with Feyenoord. I just wonder if it's somebody like him that comes through the door and has already got a pedigree in this competition. He got to a final, of course. I think when you look at the managers Spurs have had in the past that have had the Europa League, that clearly hasn't been the target to go on and win it. But whereas somebody like him that, took the competition very, very seriously, Do you think the message from the manager might transcend that ultimately Spurs may take it more seriously if they do end up in that competition?
Yeah, I think so. If a new manager comes in, you wouldn't want to see that attitude from players. I mean, there's going to be a churn. Well, at last, you would hope there's going to be a churn of some players, and we see a few move on and some new faces come in. So, yeah, I mean, I think if a manager comes in and we have the same attitude that we've had to minor European competitions, then we've got a problem. So I'm hopeful if he does come in and we are in the Conference League, yes, he will take it seriously. I mean, we've tended not to play youngsters. And the trouble is, when we play like reserve teams, we make 6 or 7 changes.
Yep.
We just see how threadbare the squad is quality-wise, even in the Conference League.
Yeah.
So, we need a bit more strength in depth. We need some churn, and all of those things may make a difference in Europe next year if it's the Conference League. To be honest, I don't think we will. I think the only chance we've got, if Everton go 2 or 3-0 up in 20 minutes and Leeds think they're done, I think we can beat Leeds. I think the atmosphere at Elland Road, knowing what they've got to do, the way we've been playing, I'd be very surprised if we get anything at Leeds this weekend. So I think even the Conference League is probably gone.
I tell you what, this Leeds preview is going to be really, really interesting. I think we're all kind of feeling around the same. Rick, coming over to you. This is meant to be the positive part, I'm guessing. We're talking about the Conference League. Jesus. Rick, we know the situation with Spurs. It is very, very unlikely, of course. They will, of course, secure Europa Conference League football. It's mad to think this club will finish with 60 or fewer points for only the second time in the last 14 Premier League seasons, having finished with 59 in 2020. And it's also only the second time this team has managed to score more than 60 goals in a Premier League season and concede more than 60. Last time we're doing that, of course, Tottenham Hotspur. Just can't make it up. But Rick, give me your thoughts very quickly on if you would like to see Spurs secure some form of European football going into the end of this season.
Yeah, you know what, Rick? For me, I think Tottenham should be in Europe. And I think any competition that doesn't have Manchester City within it is a competition that we should be looking at and try to take seriously. I take on board what the boys were saying there about the youngsters, but like we've called for this for the last couple of seasons where play some of the second team or play some of the youngsters, and we've seen them fall flatter than the first team. Do you know what I mean? We've seen Lucas Moura and Harry Kane and Sonny come off the bench to rescue a game. What I would say is that there are 5 subs, and with new blood within the squad, fingers crossed, that a lot of them are going to be looking to push and are going to be looking to prove themselves at Tottenham, and having those games that are to try and be fair to the Conference League. They're not going to be as competitive as the Premier League or anything like that. Then I think that we should use the competition, especially in the group stage, the group stages. Also, if Arne Slot is going to be the man, and like a lot of us that didn't really pay much attention to Arne Slot until the last couple of weeks, a lot of us wanted Poch, a lot of us wanted Nagelsmann, and anybody else on that list, a lot of us, the majority, didn't really pay too much attention to. Over the last couple of weeks, a lot of us have jumped onto YouTube videos, Matty Hayes. A lot of people have kind of been putting stuff out there about Arne Slot. And I heard one thing, that he tries to include everybody and he tries to make a family atmosphere at the clubs. And I heard about the players that wasn't getting much minutes, that were on the bench, that felt so included that when the team did score, they were cheering like they were a fan of the side. And he got the whole squad invested in that. And I think that could be something definitely that could be kind of a motivator for something like the Conference League, to kind of get those players and put those players in positions of trust and go, listen, go out. And like we've always said about the youngsters and the second teamers, those that are on the bench, to go and grab your chance, to go and have an influence on the game, go and stake your claim to be in the first team or to be used within the first team, take the responsibility of going out there and kind of quashing this whole trophy drought and go out there and show your best. And you never know what could happen. You absolutely never know what could happen. I think getting a hoodoo off our back is really important. And whichever competition we can do that in, I think, is vital. And then when we talk about banter, I've heard you say it a couple of times, Ricks, whether we kind of won let's say we won it, the checker trade, as Jace loves to say, always makes me chuckle. Let's say we won it and then we got bantered, right? Listen, we're all Spurs fans. We get bantered left, right, and centre. It doesn't matter what it's about, whether it's about Harry Kane backing into somebody. Do you know what I mean? We're going to get bantered for not being in Europe if we don't get it. We're going to be bantered about being in Europe. We're going to be bantered about lifting that trophy. Even if it's the Carabao Cup, the FA Cup, we're going to get bantered. We're going to get it. So we need to stop worrying about every other fan and all of that banter, because we've had it this season. And we need to concentrate as fans on ourselves and our journey, because we're starting from scratch and we've got to build from the bottom. So anything that can encourage the way of play and what we want from a football side, and a new manager kind of allowing to experiment in a competition and find the right system, find the right players, find the second team as well as the first team, I think is an advantage. So I think that we need to kind of use that as a vehicle, as a tool to kind of keep moving forward.
Yep, absolutely. If I can come over to you, Dan, just to bring it on about Daniel Levy, if I can. He promised before the match in his annual address to fans, the chairman's message, that things will get better. He stated that we shall spend the period ahead of next season working relentlessly to position our club for on-pitch success and football you'll love to come and watch. Now, the man who's being tasked with that, as we understand at the moment, and we'll come on to him in more detail, is Arne Slot. But before we do, just want to get your thoughts on the reaction to Daniel's statement, if I can, and just the feeling around the weekend's game. At one point, of course, we saw his wife pat Daniel on the knee, and look, he was looking very, very glum. I know there's a section of fans that won't want to acknowledge that for sure, but I mean, look, from my perspective, he's made a massive amount of wrong decisions in the last 4 or 5 years. Some that I just feel really have been, in some perspectives, unforgivable, if I'm going to be honest with you, and the way they've been handled and how they've almost treated the fans. So what's your reaction at the moment, Dan, with Daniel Levy? And is there any way the next appointment can bring back on side a huge proportion of fans? Or do you think now it's impossible to turn around the frustration and anger you see now, especially online? I've never seen the anger that we see online at the moment for the chairman.
I think he's gone past the tipping point for a lot of fans. I think a lot of fans have come over to the side of maybe he should probably at least step down. I think I didn't read his full statement the other day because he sort of knew what it was going to say. But that part where I think the BBC or the main broadcaster showed up a big flag saying Enoch out, Levy out, and then it cut to him and his wife touched his knee. Like, you can tell that he is very conscious of what the fans think of him. I think he's a very shy sort of individual, but I think he does want to be loved, and I think he is feeling the pressure now of I think the majority of fans at the grounds. I don't know, Paul could probably speak to this more than I could, because obviously he goes a lot more than I do. But I think the majority of the crowd, they're probably wanting to step down, which I think is probably the first time ever. I think there was always a point in the past where some things went wrong, say 10 years ago or 11 years ago. You sort of thought, even with AVB and Sherwood, you sort of thought, well, we're building the stadium, things will get better, the revenue will increase. At some point, this is going to change. It feels like now that we're sort of at the pinnacle or the peak of sort of revenue generation. Where do we go from here? The only excuse he's got now to fall back on is nothing. It's himself. He is completely, before he had that thing, we need to create more money. We need to create more money. We need to do this. We need to do that. We've got something in the background going on in the background. But now you don't have that. He is there. He is front and center of it all. And it was quite funny that when he sacked Stellini, he said, the buck stops with me. However, Stellini's lost his job. But I mean, well, the buck isn't stopping with you then if you're just going to sack the bloke underneath you. So I don't know. I think it's back to your question on Arne Slot. I don't think he's going to completely rally all the fans around Daniel Levy at first. I think he'll just, as always, depend on results. I think there's going to be people now that will always sing Enoch out at the ground, but I think you can probably sort of dampen those chants with good football and good results.
You know what's even bizarre, Paul, for me? I look at even the more moderate fans now, the match-going day fans, and I've never seen the reaction that I've seen in these last, I would say, 6 months towards Daniel, Enoch, the ball in general. And it's just a thing I've got now that I don't know whether this is actually retrievable. It's in a position where you can reverse. There's so much anger and frustration around the board, and whether one appointment can do that, because I just feel for, if it's Arne Slot or whoever it comes in, that man is under serious pressure before he's even yet managed a game. just because of the nature of where we find ourselves. So, Paul, give me your reaction, if you can, to what you feel around the ball, Daniel, at the moment, and whether you feel the situation can be, in time, resolved, if possible.
Well, yeah, I do, because, I mean, I've been relentlessly pessimistic so far, and I don't mean to be. It's very hard not to be at the moment. But that was definitely the loudest I've heard the Levy out stuff in the stadium. It wasn't a kind of little enclave of people in the South Stand and the people that have been protesting. There was a whole wave of it right around the stadium. And I think that's maybe why his wife did sort of reach out to him, because it was on a completely different level to anything you've heard in the stadium before. And it kind of goes back to what Dan was saying about as soon as the equaliser goes in that game against Brentford, we fear the worst. It's like letting the air out of a balloon. It sort of sucks the atmosphere out of the stadium. And the players must feed off of that. That's not a healthy atmosphere to have. And a lot of it is led by them and their performances. But it's not a healthy situation. I'm going to call it White Hart Lane. Never mind. But that's what I still call it. But it's it's not a healthy situation. That the atmosphere is always so toxic, because I think the players do feed off of it. But having said that, it doesn't take much. You know, if you look at Villa were on the floor. A good manager comes in with good ideas, not a drastically different set of players, and they're transformed. I mean, if we went out next season and, dare I say, looked like Arsenal, played like Arsenal, again, that's a few tweaks. That's not a massive overhaul. That wasn't 8, 9, 10 players. That's tweaks. It doesn't take a lot. You have to, and, you know, I don't doubt for 1 minute that, 18 months' time, if we're flying again and we're in the Champions League places, they'll be singing one Daniel Levy and he'll have a right smile on his face. Doesn't take much. I mean, we're all football fans. We're all fickle. And I think it is retrievable. And the bottom line is they're not going anywhere. Daniel Levy and Joe Lewis, till they sell it, are not going anywhere. He's not going to step aside. So he's in charge. He would argue he's running the business in a very good way. Maybe not so much the football club. So, you know, we haven't got any control over that. You know, so I think we just have to hope he gets it right this time in terms of the appointment, and that, you know, things change.
Yep. God, I hope he gets it right. Is it for the 14th time?
Well, we've had good managers. Maurizio Pochettino was a good manager. On paper, so was Mourinho, so was Conte, but they're managers. Those two last managers need lots of money to do what they need to do. And that was never going to happen. So they were bad fits.
This is the thing, if I'll be honest, Rick, coming over to you. Look, you've known me for a very, very long time, bless you. And, you know, I'm one of the most positive Spurs fans. I always, similar to you, always want to try and get behind the team, be vocal in my support. And I've got to be honest and say, I found it really, really difficult, even throughout this managerial search, to really have any optimism. And that was still at the point, even when Nagelsmann was still on the table, and even Maurizio was on the table. I just got the feeling that what is really going to change than what we've seen in this last 15 years. And Maurizio was the anomaly out of all of them, because we had what was called relative success. We, of course, didn't win anything, but we had a wonderful brand of football. And now looking back, and I can call myself a hypocrite, that I was one of those fans at the end of Maurizio's reign calling for him to go, because for me, the players had stopped running and the players just did not believe in the project. Now, when I look back at my thoughts then, maybe what I should have been thinking is, well, this was the time to back Maurizio, give him the actual tools to fix the problems there and not sack him. Now, again, I will say that not everybody wanted Maurizio to stay. Not everybody wanted Maurizio to go. The same way this time around, not everybody wanted Maurizio to come back to the football club. But my worry is that subsequently since then, and taking Nuno to one side, you've had, in my opinion, 2 win-now managers who I believe have not been given the adequate tools to win now. So I'm at a point where, even if it was Pep Guardiola, Carlo Ancelotti, I don't think anyone would be successful under this current hierarchy. That's how I feel. And I implore Daniel Levy to change my mind, make me feel different about that, because even when Arne Slot gets through the door, maybe I'll change my mind. I will be more upbeat whenever we do that welcome show. But I really can't at the moment even get excited for this managerial search. Where do you stand, Ricks, at the moment, and whether you are excited to see a new manager come in? And it predominantly looks like it will be Arne Slot through the door.
You know what? I totally kind of feel what you're feeling, and everything that you said there, Ricks. I felt the same. I felt the same. But like I said to you a bit earlier, I got tired of feeling like that, and I got a bit fed up of feeling like that. And I come from. I grew up, my dad introduced me to Tottenham Hotspur, and Tottenham Hotspur has been in my blood ever since I was born. Okay, I was in Tottenham baby grows, and the one thing that I know is win, lose or draw, come on you Spurs. Do you know what I mean? You always back your team, okay? And so we're in dire straits. So us as supporters, me as a supporter, what I want to do is try to, like you just done there, implore change and kind of and hope and hope that they get it right this season. Just to quickly go back onto what you were saying about Poch there, about the players stop running for him. They probably did, Ricks, but I don't think that was Poch's fault in a sense. I think that we knew that he wanted a rebuild. We knew that there were players there that he wanted out. And I think that after the kind of family atmosphere that he's created, once you hear that particular manager wants you out, then maybe there was a big disappointment and maybe there was a big drop off and maybe there was a bit like, well, all right, and cool. You don't want me? You think you can get better? Well, let's see. And maybe that attitude came out. Now, we don't know because we're not got no Amazon cameras behind there and we're not in the change rooms ourselves. But maybe that was it. And I think that Poch had enough credit in the bank to have his rebuild, to kind of have a poor season because of the heights that he took us to with no money and no backing. And I think that he for me, he was allowed a poor season and he was allowed to fix the problems that he saw that were there. But it was those that were above him that didn't believe in what he was saying and wasn't on the same song sheet as him. They wanted to keep a lot of the players that he wanted to get rid of. And look what we've ended up with. Do you know what I mean? Like, look how it's gone. So when we talk about new managers, I am excited because at this we are all at the lowest ebb that we've been at for a very long time as Spurs fans. And at those lowest ebbs, there has to be change. There has never been the full stadium singing Leave Out, Enoch out, as there was against Brentford and how they've been week in, week out. And they've been getting louder and louder. And there's more people that have had enough. And there's more chants. And there's more of that kind of, we're over this type of energy. So for Daniel Levy and that board, because you've got to include them, and you've got to remember that Daniel Levy works under the remit of the owner, Joe Lewis. So if the owner says you're only getting 15 million for a transfer budget, then Daniel's got to be like, we're only getting 50 million for a transfer budget. This is what you can do. But boss, we need 5 players. Levy, well, that's up to you. You work it out. See if you can get some frees. Do you know what I mean? And then that's where we're juggling left, right, and centre. But at this lowest ebb, it is time for change. And if we're going to go the Dutch way, I'm a big fan of the Dutch way. I've always believed that the Dutch way and the Tottenham way are very close. Like, they're very close. Ever since we brought in Jan Vertonghen, I wanted them to buy Toby at the same time. I wanted them to buy because there was both centre-backs at Ajax that play the way that we wanted them to, players that we needed and players that we at Tottenham would love, you know. I wanted Louis van Gaal before Poch because of that Dutch influence. I wanted Frank de Boer, believe it or not. Do you know what I mean? Because he won the Ajax the league like year in, year out for about, about 3-4 seasons or something like that. And I was like, maybe this is the next Dutch genius. Maybe this is the next Dutch manager. So if we are after Arne Slot and if we are to believe everything that's being said about him, it could be a very exciting time. They've made a massive mistake with the director of football in Paratici, not looking at the permutations that could have happened, that have, subsequently happened. So there's an opportunity here to get a manager and a director of football that are both singing off the same hymn sheet, that both want to do it the Tottenham way and the Dutch way, and to bring a brand of football that we as fans want to see, and for us to be competing again. We haven't competed in so long, whether that be in any competition, whether that's the Premier League or any cup competition, we haven't competed. Paul said earlier about we only get up for Champions League. Did you see that AC Milan game? That's when I lost my mind, mate. That's when I lost my mind, because everyone speaks about wanting to be in the Champions League, wanting to play for a Champions League side, and then we get there and we turn up and that's what we put out. So things have got to change. So I am excited because I'm like, at this lowest ebb, Daniel Levy knows how bad he's getting it in the stadium. You know, the board it's not just Daniel no more. Dan used to be the face of it. It's the board, Donna Cullen and the rest of them. You know what I mean? Their names are being called out, you know. And so at this point, they have to change. And maybe bringing in the new number 2, Scott Munn, maybe this is the first steps of doing that, in kind of Levy stepping away, leaving Scotty Munn to do what he's got to do, get the right director of football in to work with the manager, have a clear idea, because we haven't had a clear idea and a clear direction for so long. Have a clear idea, clear direction, a clear way of playing, a clear way of scouting and spotting talent. Not just because they're great dribblers, but because they're good people and they want to fight for the cause. Do you know what I mean? And they want to be at Tottenham and they want to prove themselves in the Premier League. So for me, it can be very exciting, bro. And I've got to hold on to it. I've got to hold on to this hope that change is going to come, you know?
Well, Rick, so I hope I get to that point where you are at and you're excited again. Dan, I'll bring it over to you. As we record this show, and again, I must add that timestamp, so we're recording here on Wednesday evening at around 8:45. The latest in the Arne Slot pursuit is that Slot's agent and Feyenoord will continue talks tomorrow, and that, of course, being Thursday, as they look for an agreement on the compensation fee. So it looks like Spurs are edging closer to their man, a reported €5 million apart. When is Tottenham not apart from an evaluation of a player or a manager? Just so Spurs, isn't it? Dan, give me your thoughts on the potential appointment of Arne Slot. And look, from the research I've done with the guy, again, I've got to be able to say, I don't watch Dutch football every week. I know Paul has got a very good Dutch confidant who we might be able to bring into this story as well for us, who obviously he relays with at TalkSport. But he does look like he plays an exciting brand of football. Of course, he's won. He's still fairly new on the scene, you say, to some degree, of course, AZ Alkmaar and, of course, Feyenoord being the 2 predominant clubs that he's been at. But in both of those clubs, I think it's fair to say that he has exceeded expectations. I think just to put something right, the reason he was actually sacked at AZ was because it was almost he was caught in the job for Feyenoord, and that's why they let him go. So there's nothing really in terms of anything to be concerned of why he was let go from there. There might be argument, and again, this is not to start anything else here from a conflicting point of view, that he may look at Spurs as a stepping stone, but you know he's got a massive aspiration of Guardiola, the way he plays football. I mean, everything around the guy, Dan, seems fairly positive.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about it?
No, I agree. Everything I've read, it seems really good. I used to live in quite close to Amsterdam, and I've got a few friends over there who say, yeah, he's the real deal. And we were speaking before we got on the air with Paul, and he was speaking about his guy, which he'll talk about in a minute. But I like him. I think he's a good coach. I think he's clearly a good coach. His trajectory has been completely upwards. The only thing I would say about him, though, is the problem is that he has no experience within any of the big 5 leagues, which is quite rare. You don't often see a manager come to England, and maybe Scotland or somewhere, not come to England, especially one of the so-called bigger clubs like Tottenham, and be, sort of thrust into that environment, working with players on clearly a different level, a different work ethic, potentially in the way that they work compared to the Dutch players in Rotterdam. So look, it's a big jury out moment, and I think for me he was probably third choice of who I wanted behind the obvious 2. But look, I'm at that stage now where I can definitely talk myself around, and I can see all those videos that Matty Hayes put up, and I can go, do you know what? Yeah, like he's worth a go, and he could be one of the best managers we've ever seen at Tottenham, but he could also be out of the door within 10 months. This is just what it's like working with Daniel Levy. You just don't know. I mean, the amount of time most managers last with Levy is minus Poch. Is I think I read a stat the other day that was the only contract extension Daniel Levy's ever given was to Pochettino. Yeah, in 21 years. So
mental, isn't it?
Yeah, the stats say that maybe he's not going to be here that long, but if you can't hope it's not going to be the next big thing, then what can you do as a fan, you know?
Yep. Paul, coming over to you, I know you've had an endorsement of the guy, I think, from your correspondent over at TalkSport. But I want to ask you is, before you give us that as well, is that my biggest concern looking at him, and again, everything is really, really positive so far from what I've read, from what I've researched, from, the background knowledge that I've done on the guy. But my only concern is that he's not really had much of a challenge to where there's been obstacles in the way, and he's had to overcome those obstacles. As Dan has said, everything's been on a fairly decent trajectory moving up, and he's not really had to kind of ride out or suffer a low period. And that's my only concern coming into the Tottenham job, that in Maurizio's first year, which I'm sure you'll remember, we had some really negative results. I think there was a defeat to West Brom, and we had some, again, I think Wigan maybe was in there as well. We had some really horrendous results that really, up until that Villa game where Harry scored, of course, that free kick, that deflected free kick, Mauricio said it himself, he thought he was going to get the sack. So I just wonder, Paul, do you think Arne Slot, despite the lack of, I'd say, experience of dealing with difficult moments, can he succeed in the role? And also your thoughts on maybe the correspondent you spoke to about his potential brand of football, whether that would excite us.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to what Dan said, Ten Hag had never managed really outside of Holland, like Bayern Munich B team, but and he's kind of hit the ground running at United and proved to be good. I mean, I would say overcoming adversity is winning the league in Holland when you've got the juggernauts of Ajax and PSV in front of you. I mean, to go and win the Dutch league with that team is pretty impressive. Again, with not a massive budget, just a great team ethic, playing good football, front foot football, being daring. And let's not forget what the club motto is. I think we've forgotten it in the last few years, but I think that's the kind of football that he wants to play. He's had quite a few endorsements. I mean, Rafa van der Vaart has been endorsing him. I just found that quote from him. He said, "I hope Arne Slot joins Tottenham. First of all, because Ajax would stand a chance for the league title again. And secondly, because Tottenham would finally get a manager who plays attractive and fun football." So that's a guy I think with Spurs in his veins. And I think Adrian, who just popped up, who's listening, he mentioned Marcel van der Kraan. He's our guy, our Dutch football correspondent. And we first talked to him about Slot when we just talked about the amazing Feyenoord story and how well they'd done about 3 or 4 months ago. Said they're top of the league. How have they done it? How are they seeing off Ajax? And he said they've got a great manager. They've got a great manager he's built a great team ethic and a lot of belief. And he said he's a brilliant manager. I mean, it's a headline grabber, but he's compared him in a lot of ways to Pep Guardiola, and he's another one of these kind of Pep disciples. So, I mean, look, all the signs are that the football we'll play will certainly be better to watch. Yeah, that's always a risk. It might be a tricky start, and as you said, Pochettino had a tricky start. So hopefully the manager will stick with him. Hopefully the fans will stick with him. I think if we see that it's heading in the right direction and the football's better to watch and we can see what he's trying to do. I mean, that was certainly not the case with Nuno. I think we all thought what's going on here was just nonplussed by the whole thing. But I think if he's given a chance, I think it'd be good. I am actually quite excited by the prospect. It's something different. It's something new. If he's given the chance to bring some players in his own image. And I don't think we've got a bad squad. I think there are good players there. And as I've said, you've seen it in other teams this season. You can turn a team around quite quickly if you've got a good person in charge. So, look, I'm quite optimistic. You may get me back in 6-7 months and say, well, that didn't last long, did it? It's great to see Ryan Mason back in charge, but I'm optimistic. I think he's going to do well for us.
Yeah, my concern, Paul, is when we do bring him on, normally the next manager is in charge.
Yeah,
such
quite
is the
possibly,
nature of it. I'll tell you what, you can't make it up. What I will just say is I think it was a very diplomatic interview he gave last Friday where he was honest and said, look, the Premier League is my dream. And I think he came across very well on that interview. He almost gave me the almost Martin Jol vibes. And I think definitely one of my favourite managers was Martin Jol for how he reconnected the fans and the supporters. I won't mention the fact, I'm going to mention it now. He was sacked at half-time. And I was there that night at Getafe, which even now, just the way that was done was just absolutely horrendous, I've got to say. But and the most weird thing is, you see Martin back at the club last season, bless him, Harry Redknapp next to him. You couldn't make it up. But I think if we got, as Paul said, that kind of brand of football that was exciting, that would almost, I think, appease a number of the match day going fans. I know, again, there's a massive amount of fans that around the world can't get to see Spurs. And again, online, social media, it's very difficult to kind of align that with the match going fans. But I do agree, after what we've had the last 4.5, 5 years of a real negative brand of football, I think we would all look forward to having a brand that is exciting, fun to watch. And maybe Arne is the right man. So we shall wait and see. We'll bring you more on that when we get it. But we have to now, unfortunately, for those that have been dreading it and trying to put it off, we have to now look forward, unfortunately, to Leeds United to come at the weekends. What we are going to do, we are going to go for our final break of this show for our listeners and audio. And taking into that break, you're going to hear from the wonderful, of course, Phil Hayes over, of course, at The Athletic for Leeds United, who gives us his preview ahead of this game to come at Elland Road. Big game for sure. Definitely for a Leeds camp. Not sure for Tottenham's camp. Dan, let's start with you for Leeds United, if I can. Now, as we go on to discuss this, we've just had some breaking news from Tottenham that Eric Dier will be missing this game. He's had a groin injury that will now keep him out for the game at the weekend. And in total, of course, that means we may see, or may have already heard or seen his last game for the football club. So I don't really want to give a reaction to that, Dan, before we come on to Leeds United in general. Do you think Eric Dier's played his final game for the club?
No, I don't think so. I think he'll be here next season. He's got a year left, unless some money comes in for him, which I very much doubt. Let me preface this by saying I really like Eric Dier as a bloke. I think he's been a good servant for Tottenham, and he's not as bad as some people make out. But I think he's had a very, very poor year. I think he had a purple patch under the start of Conte. But apart from that, I think by now, after 8 years of him being here, I think I can comfortably say that he's probably not the caliber of centre back that we need. But to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised. I think we should probably keep him around for the squad for sure. He's definitely a good squad player. I don't think I'd be too impressed if we gave him a new 3-year deal either, to be honest. I think we need to be moving on from him.
Just quickly on this, Paul, if you don't mind me coming over to you, then I'll come over to Rick's. You know, Eric Dier, I think, definitely seems to, as a number of these Spurs players, most certainly divide opinion. You know, I think what I will say is that I do believe Eric is a real vocal person at dressing room. He does care. He does want to win. I'm just concerned that I don't think centre-back is actually his role. I've said this before, that I always felt he was more of a defensive midfielder, and there are limitations to his game. So, Paul, do you think he'd be one that you would be looking to favour, trying to move on during the summer, if we could get the right offer, a year left on his contract?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he does go. It's really weird. I said on the show today, he's obviously not in the England squad. We didn't know why. We just discovered why. We thought it was on form. And on form alone, he wouldn't have been in the England squad. But as soon as he got back in the England squad, his form fell off a cliff. Before that, he was worthy of getting back in. He'd actually been playing really well under Conte. And I thought, well, he's back. He's looking like the player that we all hoped he would be. As I said, maybe he got a bit Billy Big time and got back in the England squad and just lost a bit of intensity. But his form recently has been really poor. And based on that, he wasn't worthy of a start. And when one of your mates in Ryan Mason has to drop you, that can't be easy. But he did the right thing. My gut feeling is, I don't know. Whether they're going to offer him a contract, I think we're going to see with a couple of players, maybe Harry Kane among them, that we allow players to go into their final year, and we hope the new regime can get a tune out of them, or can, in the case of Kane, to kind of entice them to sign a new deal. So,
yep.
Personally, I think Eric Dier will be there next season.
Okay, Rick's come over to you before we do look ahead to Leeds. His future currently, as we understand, is uncertain. He's got a year left. And as we understand also, I think what's key at the moment is the club currently are not in talks over a renewal, despite a lot of speculation over these last few weeks that a deal has been done. It's just waiting to be announced, and Tottenham haven't had a chance to announce it because the form has been horrific, and that could send social media into complete overdrive. So what's your thoughts, Rick, on Eric Dier? Do you expect him to leave the club at the end of the season?
I think it's tough. I think I go back to when he first turned up, and the Spursy tag was being, was everywhere. And I remember him in an interview kind of going, I kind of hate that Spursy tag. I want to get rid of it. I want to do everything I can to make sure that people don't look at us like that. We want to be strong. We want to be aggressive. We want to, have them worry about us, rather than worry about them, which is something I always say as well. And I remember him kind of saying that, and in those first couple of seasons, he done a lot to kind of make that happen. I also remember that when he missed out, and I think it was England under 21 duty. I think it was England under 21, so that he could focus on being a centre back and kind of train a bit more during the preseason about working on his game as a centre back. It's tough because there's been some moments where he has looked like a strong centre back. He's looked like a bit of a leader. He's tried his best, but then when especially this season, and I'm only going to speak about this season right at this moment, but his stats have not been great. I saw a stat kind of tweet and his kind of percentage of tackles made was in the red, and his interceptions were in the red, and a lot of the defensive stats were very, very low and in the red. So, bless him. Thank you. I thank him for his time, but if we could get some money for him, then I would take it. Or if we could use him as a sweetener and kind of swap him with somebody from Sporting Lisbon, because we're always after someone from Sporting Lisbon. I think the last one that we was linked to was Ugarte. So if we could, send him back home to Portugal and kind of get another player in exchange, I think that would be a great deal to be made. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. As with the boys, he's probably going to be here next season and leaving a free.
Right. Let's discuss Leeds United. Rick, let's stick with you. Spurs, of course, come up against the Leeds side that are fighting for their Premier League survival as they travel to Elland Road on the final day of the season. We've said on a number of occasions now this season can't come quick enough for us. And Ryan Mason, of course, we now be relying on favours from Villa if they are to secure a place in the Europa Conference League. Now, obviously, Leeds' situation is they must win if they are to avoid relegation. And even though that might not be enough. So victory for either Leicester or Everton would confirm Leeds' drop to the Championship, with Sam Allardyce's side unable to keep their fate in their own hands in recent weeks. I mean, it's interesting, Ricks. We actually are part of the final day in quite a big way, not for us, but for another team. How do you see things panning out at Elland Road?
I think it's going to be a cauldron. I think the Leeds crowd are going to be up for it. I think Big Sam's going to be up for it. I think those Leeds players are going to be up for it. They come from the school of Bielsa, so they know majority of the time when it's time to show up, they do, and especially when the crowd is on their back as well. So I think it's going to be a really tough game. They've got some good players there, and as we've seen over the season, any pressure or any type of kind of loud, volatile crowd at an away ground, we haven't really turned up for. But again, I have to kind of believe that the boys want to, they're upset about that last home game and that they want to do something. They want to leave this season on a high. So as a delusional Tottenham fan, I'm going to say that we're going to come away with like a 1-0 win, hopefully, maybe a 2-1. But it's going to be a tough game. That's just me being delusional. I will never back them to lose. Do you know what I mean? So I would hope that the boys really do turn up and kind of put on a big show for that last game of the season and kind of leave us with 3 points and showing us the green shoots of hope that we can cling on to for next season.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting coming over to you, Dan, if I can. They've gone from Bielsa to Sam Allardyce in a matter of 18 months. I mean, I think those fans, probably as much as we feel we've been through the ringer, they probably can't quite believe what they've been through in regards to how they've had a transformative effect in terms of the manager approach. But look, they've been fighting for their lives. Of course, they've had a couple of changes through the season which haven't inevitably worked out. What kind of game are you expecting up at Elland Road, Dan, which is now being billed as Survival Sunday? And for all those Spurs fans, of course, delighted to know we're now being broadcasted live on BT Sport around the world to witness if Leeds United can survive on the final day with nothing really to play for us. Dan, what do you make of it? And we all have to unmute you, Dan.
It's going to be one of those interesting games, really, because those final day things can sort of, when you've got the messages of what's happening around the other grounds filtering through to the players. They're 2 points behind Everton, aren't they? So if there's a chance that Everton are maybe drawing their game to stay up, they'll need to beat us by maybe 3 clear goals or something. So there's always the chance that they might be 1-0 ahead and just push everyone forward and we manage to hit them on the counter-attack. Someone said this earlier on, so I'm nicking his ideas, but it was on one of the things on the screen. And he said, there's going to be lots of space for Kane and Son to exploit if that is the case. The only problem is if they get the first goal, which is probably likely because of how fast they're probably going to start and the atmosphere. And yeah, we know exactly what happens with Tottenham when the atmosphere in away grounds big. Newcastle, Liverpool, for example. I think it'll just depend on who gets the first goal, because I think if we can get the first goal, Leeds are going to have to come at us and we can probably hit them on the counter. But if they get the first goal, Big Sam style, shut up shop, 10 behind the ball, if that's what they need to do, and you can just see us sort of wilting. So I don't know. It's going to be one of those interesting games. To be honest, it's going to be nice to just watch this game and sort of forget about it for 3 months, and I can just worry about the cricket until August. But apart from that,
you do sound like Jason.
Yeah. Well, I get grief for my podcast. It's just two American guys. They have no idea about cricket, so it's glad I can come and talk about it on here. But no, it's just looking forward to it. But at the same time, looking forward to it ending. I think just as much as anything else.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, mate, no problem at all. We're going to come back to you for a prediction. Paul, if I can come around to you. We understand Rodrigo banned for the big doubts for Leeds going into the game. It does leave Allardyce incredibly short up front. I think Gnonto also could start, and Brendan Aronson is pushing for greater involvement, but Luis Sinisterra, Tyler Adams remain out. It'll be interesting to see if Mason does stick with the back four like he did in the first half, but ultimately could change it. Romero, of course, Højbjerg both missed at defeat to Leeds, so I'll be interested if they're back. And when Lucas Moura will make a final appearance in a Spurs shirt, and obviously, as we know, Eric Dier being out for the game. Paul, I dread to ask you, how do you see things playing out at Elland Road?
I tend to agree with Dan. You almost can't give a prediction on a game like this because so much depends on what's going on at Goodison Park where they're playing Bournemouth, and they will react to the crowd. I mean, I think Sam's not one of the managers who says just concentrate on your own job. He'll be letting them know, I'm sure, the coaching staff, he'll let them know what they need to do at certain points. I think he'll send them out to get on the front foot because they have to win. A draw isn't enough for them. So in doing their job, they've got to get in front. But if messages come through that Everton have gone 2-0 up and Bournemouth can't be asked, and you can sense that sometimes, I don't think that'll be the case. In fact, I've got a bit of a soft spot for Everton. I've got a lot of mates who are Evertonians, but I've got a bad feeling for them because I don't know, Bournemouth playing sort of with a bit of freedom.
Is it too easy, Paul? Is that why you think for Everton all they've got to do is win, and sometimes that does manifest itself in a bizarre way?
Maybe. They've been here a few times before over the years where they've got to get a result on the last day of the season. It's not a healthy situation. They've always managed to do it. I just wonder if they might run out of luck. So, again, it's so hard because, as Dan said, everything depends on what's going on at the other game and the way the crowd look, it should be an exciting last afternoon. We've got no real skin in the game. As you said, look, Europe could steal, but if we win, we'll finish on 60 points. And Villa, if they were a draw with Brighton, which is not inconceivable, they need to win as well on that basis if we win. So, look, who knows? It's in the lap of the gods, really. It's a very difficult one to predict.
Yep. Joel, when I think back 12 months ago, just how exciting that final day was, of course, in Norwich, no one else ever had a doubt Spurs are going to go there and do the job. And yet you fast forward, 12 months later, and you're thinking, it's mad.
Mikel Arteta had a doubt, didn't he? Because, as he said, you know, they've got to go and beat Norwich. I think that's become T-shirts, screensavers, mugs.
I think he was the only man, though, that actually doubted it. I think they were in such a good, confident mood. It has been a difficult season. Paul, let's get a prediction for you. What you're going to go for? I know you said you can't predict. I'm now going to put you on the spot and ask you for a prediction. What are you going to go for?
Okay. Well, I'll work on the basis that it's... I'm going to go for a draw. I think it'll end up being a draw, which is obviously probably not good enough for us. But I think our goal difference is almost the same as Villa's, so it's going to be very tight. I'll tell you what, I'll go for a draw, and we get in the Conference League because Villa lose. Would that make any difference? I'm not even sure that works.
I'm going to double check. I'm going to double check the table very, very quickly on this. I've got the table in front of me right now. So
it'll be on head-to-heads, won't it? Then, which means we've lost twice against them.
Villa, even if Villa draw and Spurs draw, Villa will still get there. They're a point ahead of us, Aston Villa.
Oh, of course they are. Yeah, they're a point ahead.
Spurs have to win, and Villa have to lose.
Well, look, with everything I've said before about who knows, I'll go for the draw. I'll go for a 2-2, a pretty mad last day of the season 2-2 draw.
Ricks, you predicted it earlier. You're going to stick with that prediction you gave us earlier, Ricks? You still think Spurs are going to do the job?
Yeah, I mean, I always believe in this side, and they are a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde side, and when you've got to concentrate on other teams doing you a favour, that's pretty much the Tottenham way as well. How many times have we done that in Champions League groups, Europa groups, whatever? We've always kind of, and it actually, I do get fed up of it, relying on other sides and their results. But yes, I'm going to stick with it. Come on, you Spurs, 2-1 win.
Absolutely. Rick, despite the number of years you've been on here, I don't think you've ever given me a negative prediction, even though we've been in an absolute hellholes of times.
You won't get it. When we had those 4 back-to-back games against Chelsea, I predicted that we was going to win every single one of them, bruv. And every single, I came on after the loss, and every single time by the end of the show, I was like, "No, we're going to win. Come on." Do you know what I mean?
I do love the guy's optimism. The wonderful Ricky Norwood. Ricks, thank you so much. Dan, come over to you. We're gonna go for them prediction-wise.
Do you know what? I'm gonna predict it. I don't know if you remember last. It was maybe like 2011. I think we played Birmingham on the last day of the season, and I think we were 1-1 right into the last 5 minutes or something, and we were kind of getting a bit outplayed. But Birmingham needed to win, so I reckon they sort of pushed up, and I think Pavlyuchenko scored like the 92nd minute on the break and sealed the last win. So I'm gonna go with something more like that. I think we'll just nick it, on the fact that they're sort of chucking everyone forward, and we're gonna nick them on the break. Son to score the last goal. There you go.
I love it. Superb. Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on Last Word on Spurs. Where can everybody find you so they will not get this season's compilation?
Yves on Twitter and or the Dr. Tottenham podcast. I'm on there quite a bit with three other guys. So check it out.
Amazing, superb. Dan, we're looking forward to having you back on next season for your sins. Thank you so much. Rick's been an absolute pleasure. Oh, Ricky, bless you. Where can everybody find the wonderful Ricky Norwood?
Well, you know where to find me on Twitter at Ricky J Norwood, on Instagram official Ricky Norwood, and I will probably be on with Chris Cowlin after the game, after Leeds. So you can probably check me out there. But also, just a little something for all the Spurs fans. I know Paul said earlier that Slot is a disciple of Pep Guardiola. Well, Pep Guardiola is a disciple of Johan Cruyff. Do you know what I mean? And the Cruyff way at Barcelona that switched everything around. So if you need any more kind of, if I'm trying to just pep up a kind of pep, to use the pun, to pep up our supporters, that it could be great change, and finally change could come, and hopefully that light at the end of the tunnel is there for us Tottenham fans. So brighter days ahead. Come on, you Spurs.
Absolutely superb. Thank you so much, Rick. Look forward to having you back on next season as well for your sins. God, how many more years? Bless you, of absolute diamond. Thank you so much. Paul, love to have you back on Last One on Spurs. It's been an absolute pleasure. Where can we check you out daily? And I feel for you, Paul, because you try your best to keep level-headed about Spurs despite the crisis that surrounds this football club at times.
Yes, I'm still there often on a Monday after myself and Danny Kelly find ourselves having to discuss Spurs along with every other team in the Premier League. But 1 till 4, still on TalkSport, Monday to Friday, still getting away with it.
And still did it brilliantly. Paul, thank you so much. Guys, we are back with you on Sunday evening for reaction to Tottenham Hotspur's final game of the Premier League season. We'll know exactly what Spurs have done, haven't done, what they have qualified for, what they haven't qualified for. But always from the brilliant Dan from Yidvids, from the superb Ricky Norwood, from the brilliant Paul Hawksbee from TalkSport. We've been the Last One on Spurs. Guys, as always, please keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on you Spurs.